Hello, fellow sports fans. Welcome back from spring break. We have a March Madness special edition of In the Zone. Alongside Dylan Shields and Mike Zabkowski, I'm Liam Crane. We sure are glad to break down the entire bracket. In the Zone starts now. This year were Alabama, the #1 overall seed, followed by Houston, Kansas, and Purdue. Dylan, your thoughts on these teams being at the top, and how far can each of these teams go?
Well, I know there was a lot of controversy surrounding these. Like they were saying maybe Kansas should have been the overall #1 seed. There was even some arguments for Houston and Purdue. But I think the committee, I think they got it right with Alabama. I think they're the best overall 1 seed. They won the SEC conference tournament. They beat Texas A&M pretty convincingly, 82-63. And other teams like Texas, they beat Kansas 76-56 in the Big 12 finals.
Yeah.
So that's why I think Kansas wasn't the right choice for the 1 seed. And Houston, they might have been the most dominant team all year, but they also lost to Memphis 75-65. And they lost Sasser, their best player.
Right.
That's really going to hurt heading into the tournament. So overall, I really feel like the committee got it right with Alabama. I think they got the best chance to make the run, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It's still weird to see Alabama #1 overall in college basketball, right? Can we agree on that?
Yes.
What's your take, Mike?
Yeah, I think Alabama was the right choice as the #1 overall seed, but I am a little curious as to why Kansas got a #1 seed. They faltered a little bit at the end of the season, and then as you mentioned, Dylan, they lost by 20 in the Big 12 title. They were a 1 seed, Texas was a 2 seed. I'm not really sure where the reasoning is on that.
Right.
And not just the Big 12 title. Texas did really well in other games leading up to that as well. Purdue was #1 seed. That was going to happen unless they had some terrible collapse against Penn State. But, I think each of these teams, other than Alabama, the 3 of these teams I think are limited in how far they can go. Houston, as you mentioned, without Sasser, how long is he going to be out? There's some good teams in this bracket that they could face. Auburn, that's a bit of a wild card team. Purdue, if you stop Zach Edey, which is difficult to do.
Right.
It's difficult to stop a 7'4" guy. If you do slow him down, though, they're a bit limited in their ability elsewhere. Also with Kansas, Bill Self was in the hospital recently, just got out of the hospital. How is that going to play a factor? I think each of these 3 teams, other than Alabama, there's something going on where you're kind of questioning things a little bit.
Can you agree? Who's going the farthest here?
I still think Alabama's got the best chance to make it the farthest. I love their ball movement on the offensive side. They score, I believe, the 7th most points overall in terms of average points per game. I think teams like Purdue and Houston, they rely on their big guys, like you said, Zach Edey. Houston's got a bunch of big guys, too, that they rely on. While I think Alabama and Kansas rely more on their guards and their ball movement in the guard position. So I think it'll be interesting to see how these 4 teams can fare out, because all 4 of them have some tough opponents to play if they got to run into some seeds. Even as close as the 2nd round, there could be some upsets there. So you never know.
Right. Don't mean to, put you guys on the spot, but if there's one team that can stop Alabama for sure, who is it?
I mean, they do have a pretty easy path here. I don't see any major issues until the Elite 8, possibly Arizona. They're a team that could be a bit of a wild card there, might be able to stop Alabama. But, I mean, unless Alabama has some terrible, game, right? Out of the blue performance that you wouldn't expect, they have a pretty easy path to the Final Four.
Anything to add to that?
I agree. I think Arizona's probably the best chance to beat Alabama. I'd love to see that matchup. 2 high-scoring offenses going at it. And I also think #3 seed Baylor could possibly be a wild card. I think they'd be the only other wild card team that could possibly dethrone Alabama. But I think I agree with you, Mike, that Alabama's got a pretty easy path up to probably around the Sweet 16, I'd say, to make it to the Final Four.
Oh, this is so exciting. The time is here. It's finally here. March Madness is upon us. Looking at the seedings and which teams were in or out. Michael, which teams were underseeded, overseeded, and which teams should have made it?
I think across the board, there's a lot of teams here that I'm a little confused about in terms of seeding. And I look at this bracket and I think, man, did the committee make this bracket a month ago? Because Penn State makes an incredible run to the Big Ten title, and they're a 10 seed. They beat, Purdue. They beat Northwestern. They beat Michigan State. All teams. Of course, Purdue is going to be number one, but they beat Michigan State, Maryland, and Northwestern this season. All teams that are seeded higher than them. Texas A&M went to the SEC title. They're a 7 seed. Tennessee had a terrible end of the season, and they got a 4 seed.
Right.
And you'll never, ever hear me say this again, as I do not like Duke at all. But Duke got, a 5 seed, and they won the ACC. I'm not understanding this at all. And then it's funny, because I was going to say that Rutgers should have gone in, and then they go and lose to Hofstra in the NIT the other night. So I don't know what I can say on that right now. But, yeah, across the board, there are a lot of seeding positions here where I'm scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't really see what the reasoning is. And, of course, it's not just one game on the titles or championships, but even most of these teams that end the season, they played really well. You look at Duke, for example, they are a completely different team than they were 2 months ago.
Sure.
So.
What's your take?
Yeah, I agree with you on most of these takes. I think there's another one that didn't make the tournament that I think should have been in. I think Clemson should have definitely been in the tournament over NC State, who Clemson beat not once, not twice, 3 times. 3 times. And they won by like double digits in all those games. I think it makes no sense why Clemson is in an NC State is. And I absolutely agree with you about Penn State and Texas A&M both being unranked. I feel like Texas A&M's kind of like overlooked in a sense, I guess. I mean, they beat Alabama. Yes, they lost them in the SEC championship game, but they beat them earlier in the year. So I feel like them and Penn State are kind of both getting a little disrespected. And Duke, I hate Duke too, but come on. They won the ACC. They didn't have a great start to the year. But that's why I love their resilience to go on and win the ACC. They beat Miami in the semifinals, who Miami killed earlier in the year. And then they beat Virginia, a pretty good defensive team, in the finals in a low-scoring game. So I think Duke can win in all types of ways, high-scoring, low-scoring games. So, yeah, I feel like they should be way higher than a 5 seed because they got a tough matchup in Oral Roberts, and who knows if an upset can happen.
Definitely, definitely. So, quick exercise here. We'll start with you. Rutgers, before that, travesty of a game. Did you see them actually competing in March Madness, or do you just think they deserved to be ranked?
I think they deserved to be in because they had a good season. And in the Big Ten, when it was so difficult to win on the road and the Big Ten was so competitive, and we had a stretch of the season where there was 7 teams tied for second place.
Right.
It was tough to win a game in the Big Ten, and they did that. They beat other teams like Indiana. They beat almost every team in the Big Ten that made the tournament. And I think that's, you beat those teams, you should get in.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned with Clemson, absolutely correct there. NC State, how does NC State get in over Clemson? I don't get that at all. So, yes, before the Hofstra loss, then, yeah, Rutgers should have gone in. And maybe even after that, right, one game shouldn't define the whole season.
Definitely.
But, yeah, I think Rutgers should have gotten in.
And I think Clemson's pretty convincing. Like, did you see them actually competing, or is that just like they deserve to be in?
They were competing all year, honestly. They were doing pretty consistent overall. But I just think those 3 wins over NC State just do it for me. You can have NC State in, but you got to have Clemson in as well at a higher seed. I think it's ridiculous that they weren't even in the first place. They were competing all year, and they were consistent.
Well, it's not about the what ifs, it's about the here and now. We are just getting started here with our March Madness special edition of In the Zone. After this short break, we'll break down each of the region of the field of 68. In the Zone, we'll be right back. Welcome back. As mentioned, Alabama comes into this year's tournament as the #1 overall seed. Arizona, Baylor, and Virginia round out the top 4 seeds in the South region. Now, Dylan, who do you have in the South regional matchups?
Well, there's definitely some interesting matchups here in the first round. I really like the Maryland-West Virginia matchup here. I think that can be a tightly contested game.
Oh, boy.
I think Maryland's got the edge here. I think they got a little bit of a better offense here. And I even think they could possibly give Alabama some trouble if they – maybe. And I think the game that's the biggest upset alert to me is Furman and Virginia. Virginia can't score that much. They're not a high-scoring team. They're known for their perimeter defense, which is good, but Furman is a very good three-point shooting team. And I think if they can hit enough of those, I think they could possibly pull an upset against Virginia. There's some other games down here. Utah State, Missouri. I think a lot of experts are saying Utah State can beat Missouri. I agree with them. I think Utah State's an overlooked team that could possibly make a run as well. And another game that I like, and other experts are saying big time could be an upset, is Charleston-San Diego State. San Diego State's known for their big guys, so maybe that'll give them the edge. But Charleston, you want to talk about a three-point shooting team. I think that's all Charleston does is just shoot a bunch of threes. But if they can get most of them in, if they can get a good three-point percentage, I think they could possibly pull an upset. So there's a lot of good matchups here.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of kissing up to Mike here on the Maryland jargon. Let's hear your take, Mike.
No, I think the problem with that game, I guess we'll start there with Maryland and West Virginia, is West Virginia has this press that they just, it's tough, right? Yeah. And Maryland's offense, they do have a good offense, right? But there is a tendency for them to struggle from time to time. But it's the start of half. Whether it's the first half or second half, it could be either or. But they have the tendency to have a rough start to the half, and that sets them up for failure later on. Also worth noting, they don't have a lot of they don't have tall guys. They don't have big guys. Right. They've got Julian Reese, and if he gets into foul trouble, that can be a problem, and that's happened quite a lot this season. So if Juju can stay out of foul trouble, Maryland, I like their chances, and if they can beat the press, then I like their chances there. As you mentioned, that 12-5 matchup between Charleston and San Diego State's a big one. Both Charleston and Furman, as you mentioned, good three-point shooting teams. The only issue with Charleston is they don't have a lot. They're same with Maryland. They don't have a lot of big guys, so that could be an area of weakness if they lose. And don't look now, but keep an eye out for UC Santa Barbara. I know that might sound crazy. 2 years ago in the COVID bubble tournament, they gave Creighton a pretty good run for their money. Keep an eye out for the Gauchos. I'm not saying they're going to beat Baylor, but they're going to keep it close, I think. And as you mentioned with that 10-7 matchup, I think across the board, those 10-7 matchups are just a coin flip kind of thing, where you could choose either team, and I could understand.
Are you convinced that your boys in Maryland might be able to compete with Alabama?
First, we got to take care of West Virginia.
Right.
Right. So, but look, I don't know if it was, no, it wasn't last year because we didn't make the tournament last year, but 2 years ago, Maryland beat UConn in the first round, and then we played Alabama, but it felt a lot like we were playing the Splash Brothers from Golden State because that game, I still have nightmares about that game where Alabama hit a bajillion threes on us. So we gotta slow them down, and we have to, we gotta slow the game down and prevent them from getting those threes. Now,
Dylan said Furman over Virginia is his upset pick in the Southern region. Do you have an upset pick at all, or are you just kind of speculating some?
No,
teams?
I like that too. I like Furman to win. That's a toss-up for me. Charleston, again, another iffy one. If they can get the threes to fall, then that'll be good. But Virginia, they do slow the game down. I mean, that's something we know about Virginia, but that's burned them in the past in the tournament. May I not need to remind you that they lost to UMBC as the only 1 seed to lose to a 16 seed. But it also happened in that COVID tournament 2 years ago. I believe it was either Marshall or North Texas. I think it was Marshall where they either lost or almost lost. And that low-scoring style of offense doesn't really work in the tournament.
Yep. I'm excited about this region. I mean, obviously Alabama is kind of the juggernaut, but there's a lot to watch here, and I think we're going to see that as a pattern for all four. Looking at the opposite side of the bracket, in the Midwest, Houston is the #1 seed. Texas is a strong contender as the 2 seed in the Midwest as well. Now, Mike, your reaction to the Midwest region?
This region could be prime for upsets all around. I think you could look at almost any matchup and make a case for an upset. I do like Auburn over Iowa in that 8-9 matchup.
For sure.
I think Auburn has been playing really good basketball as of late. Even in that 5 and 4 games right there with Miami and Drake and Indiana and Kent State. I think Indiana has also been faltering a little bit toward the end of the season. And Miami, they're a good team, but I don't know, that 12-5 game gets me a little excited.
Yeah, definitely.
So anything could happen there. And then, Iowa State Pitt, I hate to say it, Dylan, but I do think Iowa State has the upper hand as of now. But they're a team that they're not consistent, so it depends on what team shows up in that game. And then Texas A&M Penn State, as mentioned when we were talking about the seedings, that's a really good matchup, but for the wrong reason. Neither of those teams should be in the seed they are in.
I agree.
But they are in that matchup, and that's going to be a really good game.
What's your take?
Well, I think Texas A&M Penn State will be the game of the first round. Sure. I think it'll be a high-scoring game. It'll be close. I'm very excited to see that matchup and see who comes on top. I think Penn State's got a little bit of an edge in terms of three-point shooting. They live and die by the three-point shooting, but they're one of the best in the country. So if they can hit those threes, I think they can pull it off. I agree with you on Miami and Drake. Miami's just kind of been inconsistent as of recently. Yes, they share the ACC regular season championship, but they couldn't get it done in the ACC tournament. I feel like you're never going to know what you see with Miami and the way they play. Same with Iowa State and Pitt. I agree. Pitt is my team, but as well, Iowa State, yes, you said you never know what you're going to get. Pitt's the same way. You never know what you're going to get out of them. And Pitt was without their center, Federico, for that game last night over Mississippi State. I hope to God he can come back and he can play Friday. But I think that one will at least be close.
Sure.
But, yeah, I think Pitt might be in trouble if Iowa State can hit the threes. But I agree with you. There could be a lot of upsets in the Midwest.
Definitely. Penn State, Texas A&M, who do you have winning that game?
I think Penn State wins it, honestly.
Wow.
I think it'll be really close, but I think the edge in three-point shooting that Penn State has over Texas A&M will be the death of Texas A&M.
I think you just made a lot of people happy with that one.
No, I agree, and that's crazy. Yes, I'm a Maryland fan. I just said I think Penn State's going to win. You did hear me correctly. But as you mentioned, the three-point shooting on the Nittany Lions team is really good, and they also do extremely well on the offensive boards. But we talk about the inconsistency with some of these teams. That's across the board. We talk, Iowa, Auburn, all these teams, almost except for maybe Alabama and a few other teams, Marquette, UCLA, Arizona, whatever. Mm-hmm. Other than the top teams in each region, every team has their ups and downs this season. So I think that really makes for an exciting tournament where literally anything can happen.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to nitpick your statement about any of these teams. We could see an upset in these games. What are the odds that a team like Northern Kentucky could actually beat Houston?
Well, 16 seeds. Their record is 1 in 120, I believe. So I would say
statistically
1 in 9 quintillion.
Okay.
The same odds as you having a perfect
Sounds
bracket.
good.
Yeah.
Right, but more than most seasons, I think we can make the argument. I mean, this is really, really close this year. I've heard a lot of experts bringing Miami to the Final Four for some reason. I don't agree with that.
Because they went to the Elite Eight last year, so they think it's going to happen again.
Right, and
You never know.
so a lot of people think that they're just going to take a first-round exit, and I just love that about this year. And yeah, again, we will notice the pattern as we talk about the other regions. So let's move on. In the West, Kansas is the #1 seed, followed by UCLA, Gonzaga, and UConn as the top 4 seeds. Dylan, there are some intriguing matchups in the West region as we've discussed. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like this is another one that could potentially have some upsets here. I love the Arkansas-Illinois matchup. I feel like that one, 8 and 9, like you said, it's a coin flip. I think Arkansas's got a little bit of an advantage because I think they've honestly played a little bit of tougher competition overall. But you never know. It could be a close game. And I think they're a team that can give Kansas some trouble in terms of their defense. I think Arkansas's got a pretty solid defensive unit. I think a very popular upset pick that I've heard from so many experts is St. Mary's VCU.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think VCU can beat St. Mary's. St. Mary's didn't look that well in that game against Gonzaga in the conference finals. It's Gonzaga, but I really think VCU, they got a really good defensive team. They haven't allowed a lot of 60-point games, VCU, this season, and if they can do that to St. Mary's, I really feel like they can upset them as well. Looking at the other games here, Northwestern, Boise State, that's another toss-up. I think Northwestern's kind of an underrated team. I think they've had some impressive wins over the year. They beat Purdue. They beat some other good teams as well. But, yeah, I think there's a lot of games that can have some potential upsets. And this might be the one part of the bracket where the 1 seed maybe doesn't even make it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah. What's your take on the West, Mike?
Interesting, yeah. I think that Arkansas-Illinois game is similar to what we talked about Iowa State and Pitt, where it depends on what teams show up. Arkansas has had games where they looked like maybe a top 25 team. They've also had games where they don't even belong in the Division I. It just depends on what happens there. But they do have a very good defensive squad, as you mentioned. And Illinois is a team in a few years they're going to be really good. Right now they're really young. They just got over Kofi Coburn going to the draft. They lost some other guys as well. They're really young, but they're talented. So a few years from now, they're going to be really good. And I think they have a really good chance of beating Arkansas there. As you mentioned with St. Mary's and VCU, honestly, I hate to say it, but I'm not seeing it from VCU beating St. Mary's. St. Mary's, as you mentioned, yeah, they lost to Gonzaga. But it was Gonzaga, right? We expect Gonzaga to win that division, or the conference, excuse me. But you look at the rest of their season, St. Mary's was really good this season. They were undefeated in conference play for, I think, 3/4 of the conference slate. And then also, Iona-UConn could be an interesting game. UConn has consistently struggled in March Madness over the past few years. I believe last year they had a first-round exit to New Mexico.
Yep.
The year before that, they had a first-round exit to Maryland. They don't do well in March. And Iona is a team that, They might come from a mid-major type of conference and all that, but they've got a Hall of Fame coach in Rick Pitino who knows how to coach teams in March. We saw it 2 years ago when they played 2-seed Alabama. Iona was a 15-seed. They played Alabama, and they kept it respectable, which you don't see in a 15-2 matchup all that often. So if Iona can keep it close early with UConn, survive the early storm, Iona might be in a position to pull off a wild upset.
Right. I think Kansas is on a lot of people's radar right now. Boys, what are the odds that we see Kansas in the Final Four among other teams?
A team I really like that I think could dethrone Kansas is Gonzaga. I really like them at that 3 spot. And they have 5 losses, and that's considered a down year for them.
Yeah.
No one's talking about them. They won the conference, but no one's talking about them because they're the 3 seed.
Right.
I like the path that they got here. They got Grand Canyon in the first round. They'll play either TCU or the winner of Arizona State, Nevada. I like the road that they have. They'll probably most likely have to run into Kansas, but I think Gonzaga with their forwards, I think can overwhelm Kansas because they don't have a lot of big guys. So I don't think Kansas can make the Final Four. I think Gonzaga is my team that really I think can make a run.
You don't like Kansas too much this year.
I think, we look at all these matchups in their kind of quadrant of the bracket. They're going to be big fans of VCU and Iona in these games, obviously. And if they do get those upsets, then yeah, they might get an easy path to the Elite Eight. But I do like the potential matchup of Gonzaga-UCLA. Because as you mentioned, nobody's really talking about Gonzaga. Maybe that's because they're also a team that doesn't really live up to expectations in March. But now as a 3 seed, maybe they don't have that pressure on them, so maybe they can elevate to that next level that we expected them to be at in previous years. But yeah, UCLA-Gonzaga as a potential Sweet 16 matchup, that would be a great game.
Yeah.
And it could happen.
I honestly think it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think, we don't know. A lot of people might have this wrong. Not going to beat a dead horse here. There's going to be a lot to talk about over the next few weeks.
The only thing is with TCU, they've been playing some good ball as of late as well. I know they beat Kansas State in the Big 12 tournament, and even before the Big 12 tournament, they were kind of beating some teams that maybe they shouldn't have. So TCU is going to be a little bit of a test if they get past the first round against Gonzaga.
That's right. Well, let's move on to the last region, but certainly not the least region. It's the East region. Now, this bracket has Purdue at number 1 seed, but Mike, is the East up for grabs, or does Purdue have a pretty easy path?
No, the East is absolutely up for grabs, and another matchup I like here is, I'll start with Duke, Oral Roberts. Now, we may all remember Oral Roberts from a few years ago, not last year, 2 years ago, as the other 15 seed to make a run. Yeah. That was in the COVID tournament deal there. I think they do have that kid, Max Asmus, the 3-point wizard, back, so look out for him. But I think, Duke's going to look at that film from 2 years ago and say, we can't let that happen again, right?
Right.
And I think no matter what team is playing Oral Roberts, they're going to look at that film and say, we got to shut down this kid who's like the new Steph Curry, basically. So I'm not sure on their ability other than Max Asmus. I'm not sure if they have any other guys that will be able to step up and beat Duke, because Duke has some size, they've got some shooters, so while that might be a popular 12-5 upset, I'm not buying it for the reason that I think teams are not going to get fooled by Max Asmus. They're going to respect Oral Roberts, which is bad news for Oral Roberts, right? And then Kentucky, I think, has a potential to go pretty far if they play well. Kansas State is a bit of shaky as of late. If Kentucky can beat Providence, who also has been shaky as of late, I like Kentucky's chances to go to the Sweet 16. Another team to look out for here is Michigan State, because no matter what seed they are always good come March. It doesn't matter what team he has. Tom Izzo knows how to coach his team up, so I have them losing to Marquette in the next round, but they could make a run to the Final Four for all I know, because Tom Izzo does that kind of thing. And then also Purdue, I really like the idea of Purdue playing Memphis in the second round. I think that might be the spot where we see the first 1 seed go down to Memphis.
What's your take on the East?
I agree with that Memphis take. I really do. I think that Houston win that Memphis had just proved that they can beat the best.
And they throttled Tulane in the semifinal. They beat them by 40.
Yes, they did. The problem is, can you stop Zach Edey? Do you have the size to stop him? Memphis could possibly win it with their shooting. They could possibly overwhelm Zach Edey in that offense with some 3-point shooting. I love the Duke Oral Roberts matchup, like you said. I love Philip Zabkowski on Duke. He is one of the best players, one of the best centers in the country. And as good as Oral Roberts' 3-point shooting is, I feel like Philip Zabkowski is just too much for Oral Roberts to handle. I think a potential upset that we haven't talked about yet is Tennessee, Louisiana. We talked about earlier, Tennessee has had a bad few weeks. And Louisiana's kind of an underrated team as well from the three-point shooting. And Tennessee's defense, not good.
Yeah.
Not good at all. They got smacked in the SEC conference tournament. So I think Louisiana has the potential to upset Tennessee. I agree with you on Kentucky on making a run. They had a rough start earlier in the year, but John Calipari knows how to coach a team to get them back up.
Same thing with Izzo. He just knows how to take a team into March.
Exactly. You got to trust those Hall of Fame caliber coaches that they can make these runs. If they run into Kansas State, it will be a tough matchup for Kentucky, but they could possibly make a run. And Marquette, I feel like, is getting slept on too. I know you said Michigan State's a very good team, but the Big East was pretty competitive.
Yeah.
And Marquette, I believe they won the pretty tough Big East conference. So
Yeah, they won the regular season and the tournament.
And the tournament, that's right, yeah. So I feel like this one's probably the most unpredictable out of all the brackets. And I agree with you. I think this is the most likely where a 1 seed could be taken down.
Yeah,
And that's just honestly up to the Big Ten reputation. They have a great regular season and they disappoint in the March Madness tournament. So that's kind of where that comes from for me, as well as Memphis being a good team as of late. And I hate to admit it, out of 68 teams, yes, there are some teams I don't know too much on. Louisiana is one of them. And I think if any other team was in that spot, I would take them over Tennessee. But I don't know too much about Louisiana right now. But Tennessee, they're not playing very well right now, so I could definitely see that happening.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely just think that I think this bracket's got the most potential for these upsets. I think you can see someone as far as Memphis making a big-time run like this. I mean, you never know. I think I love Duke. I think they're the one that has a potential to also make a run. I think they can also be a team that can take down Purdue because they got Phil Bukowski, and he can match up with Eddie.
Yeah.
I would love to see that matchup. And as much as I personally don't like Duke, I really feel like they have the best chance to make like an unexpected run.
You don't hear that too often from Duke, an unexpected
No.
run. That's unheard of. That's like saying, oh, Alabama football is going to be unexpectedly good this season.
Right, yeah. No,
Well, it's their first year without
you're
Coach
right.
K.
Yeah.
And they had a rough start, but I'll give it to their new coach. He's exceeded expectations.
Still just very weird to hear, unfamiliar, but same goes for this year. So a week from now, we'll see how right or how wrong we were about the first round. Now, while we may have been away for spring break, last week our Marauder athletic teams certainly were not. Ruby Mundok has an update for us in Ville Sports. Ruby, take it away.
Thanks, Liam. Spring sports are off to an exciting start here at Millersville, with many of our teams playing over spring break. I've got the full recap for you. Women's lacrosse took on Wilmington over the weekend, winning a high-scoring game 20-11. Head coach Caitlin Halfdell shared that a combination of unselfish play and control of the attack led the team to the victory. This win brings the team's record to 3-2. Baseball is off to a strong start, winning a doubleheader against Mansfield to increase their record to 18-4. They won Game 1 3-1 and Game 2 8-1. Over the 18 innings, the Marauders allowed only 5 hits and struck out 15. They take on PSAC rival Kutztown next. Softball traveled down to sunny Florida to play in the spring games, where they split the tournament with 5 wins and 5 losses. They dropped their final 2 games to Kentucky Wesleyan and Notre Dame, Ohio, but hope to bounce back in a doubleheader against Georgian Court University next. Now we send it back to the desk for an update on NFL free agency. Liam?
Thanks, Ruby. NFL free agency has been through the roof. It seems like we've been talking about Lamar Jackson for forever. That is going to continue for a while now. Mike, the Ravens tag Lamar Jackson with a non-exclusive franchise tag. If they want Lamar back in Baltimore, why would they allow him to speak with other teams?
And you're asking the question that every single Ravens fan who doesn't know, I don't want to say doesn't know anything about football, but doesn't know very much about football. And the reason that the Ravens did this is because, the terms of this deal are he can speak to other teams. If he can sign an offer sheet, the Ravens have the chance to match it before he signs that offer, yada, yada, yada. Right, those are the terms of the deal. The reason the Ravens are going to do that is because they feel confident that no other team wants to pay Lamar what he's asking for. So they feel confident that out of the 31 other teams that actually want him, they're not going to offer him what Lamar's asking, and they feel comfortable enough that they can match that number. And so because Lamar has said repeatedly, I want this much guaranteed money, I want Deshaun Watson money, all this and that, and the message hasn't gone through, like, you're not getting that.
Right.
And basically, this is their way of saying, go figure it out for yourself and come back to us when you actually have come back down to reality.
Interesting. What's your take on this whole thing?
And I think the reason that teams maybe don't want Lamar is because maybe he hit his highest ceiling in that 2019 MVP season. Has he hit his highest ceiling? Is this as far as he's going to get going to the divisional round and losing? I think that's why, because maybe he has like a high ceiling, but it is such a risk to pay a guy who wants to get paid more than Deshaun, and it might not be worth it in the end.
Right. It also seems like if you take a team like the Panthers, for example, who need a quarterback, and they say, okay, we're going to make Lamar an offer that the Ravens can match. They put that money on the table. They have to set it aside. They're rebuilding. They can't make any other free agent moves until like Lamar makes his decision with Baltimore and he's comparing. It puts you in a free agency nightmare. I think Lamar stays in Baltimore, and like you said, he's going to learn his lesson. Moving to the West Coast, Las Vegas has had a busy start to the offseason. Derek Carr leaving for the Saints, and now the Raiders have found their new quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo. Vegas also signed former Eagle Marcus Epps, as well as trading Darren Waller to the Giants. Dylan, your reaction to these moves?
I love the Saints getting Carr. I really feel like the Saints can win that division with Carr, Kamara, Olave, and Michael Thomas. I really feel like that was a really good move for them. Jimmy G of the Raiders, not so much. Jimmy G's kind of like, he's not going to wow you, but he'll make the plays to win. But do the Raiders have a good enough roster? Will they keep Josh Jacobs? How happy would Devontae be now that Carr's gone? Yeah, I feel like some of these moves, like I said, love the Carr move. Jimmy G, not so much.
Yeah, what's your opinion?
Now, I know I said Lamar Jackson needs to come back down to reality. Maybe I need to come back a little bit down to reality because I actually like the Jimmy Garoppolo signing. Call me crazy. But I look at what he did with San Francisco, right, where, he didn't pass the ball too much. Josh Jacobs is a good running back for the Raiders. And he throws a little bit once in a while to good wide receivers like Devontae Adams if he stays, as you mentioned. But that is an interesting issue. Will these guys want to stay or leave? If they stay, other than Darren Waller, of course, because he's gone, it could work. It could work.
Now, food for thought here. Here's a little fact or stat. Jimmy G is the winningest quarterback of all time without throwing a single touchdown in the game. That dude will get you into the red zone, exactly where you need to be every time. I don't necessarily dislike the move to the Raiders. I just wanted him to go to someone like the Jets that were set up to win. They just needed a mature quarterback who was going to drive them down the field. Or the Bucs. I think that would have been a good move. I think the Raiders is fine. It just doesn't make as much sense. But we'll see. With everything, we'll see. Now in Philly, the Eagles are not only lost the Super Bowl this past February, but also lost a plethora of key players to start free agency. Javon Hargrave, Andre Dillard, TJ Edwards, Marcus Epps, and now Darius Slay got released. All of those guys signed with different teams. Dylan, does this hinder the Eagles' ability to make another Super Bowl run?
Well, Hargrave and Slay hurt. Those ones and the other two, they hurt. But I don't think it hurts it that much. I really feel like the Eagles got a good enough roster. I mean, Jason Kelsey's coming back. They re-signed Bradbury, who's their best corner, didn't allow a touchdown all year. So, yes, maybe their defense isn't going to be as, elite, but I still feel like it's ridiculous to say, well, they're not going to compete anymore. I think, that's nonsense. I feel like as long as that offense, Hurts and Brown, are still there and some pieces, they got Jordan Davis. They can develop him as well as a good pass rusher. I feel like the Eagles will be fine.
Yeah, what about you?
That's the good news is that they did draft a lot of defensive players in the draft last season.
Yeah.
And the other good news is that their offense has stayed relatively together as well. So that's the good news for them. The bad news, of course, is that they lost all those guys, and a big majority of those guys were veteran, leaders, so to speak. So, doesn't take an expert to say we'll see what happens, but I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to say they're not going to compete because they will, but I'm not sure that they're going to be as dominant as they were this past season.
Could be more of a locker room issue because of the leadership, like you said, but I don't know if this is a bold take. I think the defense was a little bit overrated from last year. The offense was the power in that team, and now that Gannon's gone, we get to see a little bit of a fresh start with some of these young guys.
Yeah.
I think Philly fans have reason to be optimistic, but we'll see. Now, there have been numerous rumors that Aaron Rodgers will be the quarterback for the New York Jets, and Rodgers has also rumored to give the Jets what seems like a wish list of free agents he'd like the Jets to sign before he accepts a new trade. That list includes Alan Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, Randall Cobb, and Odell Beckham Jr. Notice a trend? I do. What are your thoughts, Mike?
I'm laughing because I recall Aaron Rodgers saying one of two things. One was that he didn't have any control over who the front office brings in or whatever, right? Okay, sure, he's maybe going to get that role with the Jets. The other thing I recall him saying is that he didn't have enough good targets in Green Bay. So why would you want to bring every single target you had from Green Bay to your new team if they were not good enough in Green Bay? I'm not really seeing the correlation here. And okay, Odell Beckham Jr., does that just change everything? That's just adding OBJ to the Packers.
Yeah, I don't get it. What about you?
I mean, does Rodgers know that Garrett Wilson exists? Rookie of the Year, wide receiver? I don't understand. I mean, I get that he wants weapons, but I mean, I feel like he's kind of delaying what he's going to do for the attention, honestly, in my opinion.
He just wants familiarity at this point, and he said openly, like, I plan on playing for the Jets. Well, congratulations, buddy. You made the Packers pay you $50 million. This isn't as easy as you want. So if your wish list doesn't come true, you cannot complain about that as well. All right, guys, enough about that. That's going to do it for this week's edition of In the Zone. For Dylan Shields and Michael Zabkowski and Ruby Mundok, I'm Liam Crane. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week right here on In the Zone.